Good morning. Denise Dryden here doing my weekly information on what's going on and what we can do about it. I'm an integrational coach, so I bring a lot of this from my practice and from what I read and interactions, and it's sort of an interesting process to sort of see how it all comes along. So today's a full moon. It is that we're in the last couple weeks of December, and in 2 days is the winter solstice. So there's some powerful stuff going on, and I'm sure you can feel it. And today I wanted to talk about how we shift from leadership to governing. And this has come up quite frequently in my sessions with family, with clients that are working with their businesses or their positions that they hold. And I thought that it was really important because we're dismantling old systems. We're addressing old paradigms that don't work anymore, whether it's like patriarchy, top-down management, control, fear paradigms. These are things that are just been coming up for the whole year, and it's time that we sort of look at those. It makes sense to me that they're coming up because for the last 40 to 45 years, we have been guided to shake off some of these systems, some of these controls, some of these ways that authority has been used against us, with us, partnered with us, what authority is by design. Because it started with the Indigos in the late 70s when they came in and they were sort of the warriors, the fighters for truth. And then it was followed by a series of vibrational seeded children that kind of came across as taking the education system, taking the family system, taking the work environments, and shifting them dramatically through the crystals and the rainbows. And then when we got to the diamonds 10 years ago, at the earliest onset of them, what we have is this brilliance towards self-discovery and seeking new ways. So, we can say, oh, it's changed a lot in the last 40 years, or last 10 years, or last 5 years, or last 2 years. What I'm noticing is by design. By design, because our previous systems have failed. Whether it's our corporate financial controls, whether it's the governments that have been for sale to the leading prices, purchases for whatever positions, patents, interests that they have, as we know. Our family systems have been in isolation since the 40s, 50s, and 60s, which is, like this nuclear family where you buy a house and you raise your children by yourself without extended family or without tribe or community members around you. This has been taking its toll. And we found that marriages can't endure the stressors that come in from being the sole two that are in charge of running the house, creating the income, making decisions about children, and co-parenting and salvaging their relationship. And we also have kids that are refusing to be led. This is a new one. This is in the last 2 to 3 years. Kids that are refusing to be led. So we're shifting from being led to governing ourselves, governing within each other as a community, even in our extended community. So when I use the word govern, the first thing that came up was that there's some pretty severe definitions on there about governing, which is to power over, to maintain control of. And when I went sort of through it and started to look at some of the other words that are around governing, it's to steer, it's to guide, it's to influence or to shape, it is to serve. Ultimately, it is to serve. It is to contribute and to collaborate and create something new, to bring things into form, to direct with sort of a rudder, what can happen. Then when I added to self-govern, I realized that I've been talking about this for the whole last year, right? Which is self-knowledge. What do we know about ourselves and what works for us and what doesn't work for us? Self-management of our nervous system, of our reaction to the external events around us. And to be aware, and this was directly from the definition of to self-govern, is to be aware of all of the functions of regulation without intervention from an external authority. So it seems to me that to govern is to access your perceptive skills, right? To sort of take on, oh, these are my this is where I'm really good at observing, this is my intuitions, and then to confidently assess things. Like, from what I gather, this is what I'm going to put forward right now as what I've gathered. Now that can change. Of course it can change with any event, anything that comes along. Of course it can. And that's what assessments are all about. It's not a solid line in the sand. Assessment is saying, at this point, this is what is happening. And to combine, our mental acuity, right? For how we gather things, with the best part is our emotional understanding. So it's mental and emotion. It's air and water, right? And it's that letting that energy inform us so that we can take action from that place. Because when we step beyond our old roles, the positions of authority that we have held or that we believe exist above and around us, and the controls, what happens is we become guides and sages, and we govern ourselves and those around us very differently. So when we soften and we shift into governing, it is collaborating with all of the pieces of information and then guiding that forward. So I always provide a series of tips as we go along through this. And before I go into that, I've been offering this Tuesday Tools, which is Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, on a Zoom, 4 spots, and taking the lesson or the information from each Sunday video and then offering it in a set of tools. So it makes sense that we're going to play with some things like, where do we react to authority? Where do we have these belief systems? What do we control and what do we avoid to be controlled by, and how do we shift those? Because I've got some really solid tools that I've used for the last 5 years with parents and teens within the family system when authority has to shift. So there are some great opportunities there. If you want to come take Tuesday's Tools, you can sign up. The link will be in the bottom. So tips on what do we do when we're really talking about this bigger concept of, self-governing, governing and allowing leadership to shift. I think the first one that I would start with is to explore when and where you're stuck in the issue of right or wrong, good or bad, where you come to loggerheads, right? Where you're just at that spot where, I have an opinion and this other person or this group or this thing is wrong, or I'm good, that's bad, or whatever that division line is. Because whether it's behavior or it's choices or it's what we're being told through media and politics and whatnot, what we want to do is we want to find out, what's this about? Why am I taking this stance that this is right or I'm right and they're wrong? So when we really get to that point of seeing that, that's the first most important thing that we can do is explore, where is that division line between right and wrong and good and bad? The second is to hold that specific spot, that issue, that thing, that one thing, whether it's about, children going back to school, whether it is your position on the current medical issues, whether it's your position on politics, or here in Montana, whether it's your position on politics and who's moved into the state in the last year, right? So to hold that specific issue and then freeze it. Kind of like it used to be an old Twilight Zone episode where everything froze except for this one guy, and he could walk around and look at all of it and take it all in. So walk around it, take on the different views, perspectives, right? And go, well, where's this different? Where does this require an enormous amount of openness for me to explore? Look at where you're totally rigid, like I don't even want to. And then we can start to begin to get some curiosity and look at, how did we get to this point where I hold this and you hold that? Number 3, pay attention to your body. When does it grip in, get rigid, contract, right? React to something. And when it reacts to something, the most important thing is, these are gold mines for information. When your body is in reaction, when you get that pit in your stomach, or your shoulders tense in, or your jaw goes like this, and you're like, I am not even going to listen to this, then we know that we're in a rigid spot. And that rigid spot has information. That's the best place where we go for self-knowledge, which is, wow, I found something that's really, really stuck in me. And that is where I want to start, right? So pay attention to where your body grips in. Number 4, there's usually a story, a tangle, a bunch of, I always call it a tangle of threads. It's like a big old knot of emotions and beliefs where there is this grip. It might come, where does it come from? Does it come from mom and dad? Does it come from school? Does it come from a friend? Where did this sort of tangled reaction come to? Whether it is, I was raised with this political view and I don't like those. I was raised with this value for education. I don't understand why parents aren't jumping on board for schooling. Could be anything, and I'm purposely staying broad on this because this is, I can give you one example, but it carries into so many other facets of ourselves. So when we know that where there's a tangle, that there's that grip, we can choose to compassionately untangle it, which means I have to figure out ways to sort of loosen it and explore it. Like, what is it? When did this start? Where did it originate? What else does this thing do? What happens to me when I'm in this? What happens to others around me when I'm in this? So an example that I had when my children were growing up, where there were these certain expectations around holidays. And of course there were, I was trying to create the magical It's a Wonderful Life, or whatever for my children. And there would be this grip. And I realized this isn't their grip. This is mine. And it isn't even my husband's. It isn't even our family systems. But it is something that I hold on to. And so, and what happens to the people around me when I get like that? Then we start to realize that governing is paying attention to when I am resistant to opening and allowing something to happen, or when I'm open and flowing with it and going like, okay, I get their perspective. I understand that I don't necessarily agree with it. I can agree to disagree with you on this, and we still need to come to some sort of resolution. And this is a really good tool to use when you have teenagers at home, right? So number 5, governing can be a focus on the energy. It's not about the people. It's not about the thing. It's about the energy that's around it. And paying attention to when this is stopped and when it flows, when it's about yourself or when it's about others. So governing, I'm working very specifically with some clients that are in higher levels of leadership where these loggerheads are happening all the time. And so it's about finding out where your position is, what happens to your energy system, your nervous system when you get into these, look at the ramifications around you, and then find ways to self-govern through that, right? Because self-governing is sovereignty, and we've been talking a lot about sovereignty over the last few years. As we go into this full moon, this end of December, there's these markers that say, what worked for me this year? What didn't work for me? What can I do about that? When you get stuck on that, that's maybe a time when you go watch some of my previous videos or drop me a note and let's have a conversation, because I am here to help. You can find me on DeniseDryden.com, and there's links below to all of my other places where you can find out who I am and what I'm doing. Have a wonderful full moon. Have a wonderful winter solstice and holiday season. You take care. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.